right, welcome everyone, and thank you for tuning in today. My name is Rusty Pepper, and I'm the host of the Why Marketing podcast. Today's guest is John Behling, the CMO of Clearly Canadian. That's the sparkling spring water company. John was also part of the American Buyout team and is a member of its board of directors. Welcome to the show, John.
Appreciate it, Rusty. Thanks for having me.
I've been excited about it because as a child of the 80s, I can still remember those old Clearly Canadian commercials. So clearly, I guess, marketing does work.
Yeah, well, that was your affinity and remembering the product is a little bit why we got started again.
I bet. I look forward to getting to that part of the journey and your story. But before we go there, would you mind kind of sharing with us a little bit about how you got into marketing in the first place, and was being a CMO a role that you could have envisioned when you first started out your career?
So the first quick answer is no. If you would have asked me what the acronym when I was 21 coming out of college, what CMO was, I probably didn't even know what it meant. The second part of your question, if I could have ever imagined doing what I'm doing now, or even in marketing, my answer would have been no. And part of that is because I've probably taken the least direct route that most marketers do. I mean, I know so many colleagues and friends that, went to business school, then maybe worked for a little bit as an associate brand manager or something, and then got their MBA. And I mean, in terms of being classically trained, I got my degree as a BFA in graphic design from Iowa State, and I was a designer. So what led me down the path was I was very fortunate in some of my first agency jobs to be working in the consumer packaged goods category with the likes of, the time Keebler, Quaker Oats, Leaf Candies, a variety, Kraft General Foods. So that kind of took me on the journey of really kind of liking the CPG side of the world. And, I've gone in and out of CPG, but obviously landed back in it again. But I had no idea that I was going to be in the brand management and the strategy side at all.
So probably coming out from, with the consumer packaged goods side of it, how do you think that may have impacted or brought value to kind of helping mold or shape your career path?
Honestly, probably the biggest thing is the products that I worked on were a lot of fun. I mean, when you're working on Ernie the Elf during the day, I mean, it's a fun product. You're working on snack chips and cookies. And so, they were fun. And so I really enjoyed what I was doing. And I think that's the big thing, is really enjoying the projects you're working on.
Where did you go from there? What was the next move?
Yeah. I will fully admit that I was a mediocre graphic designer. There's a lot of talented people out there, and I was mediocre, but I got the job done, I guess. Yeah. But I started going to more of the account management side and strategy side of things, and so even back then, marketing or wasn't necessarily a term that I was probably necessarily really familiar with. It just kind of organically went that direction, and like many agency people do, I had the opportunity to jump the fence and go on the client side, if you will. And then I got my first job at the time, Jim Beam Brands company, and worked in promotional marketing. And that's when I left the agency side and then went to the brand management side, working in spirits.
So as a 29-year-old male going to Jim Beam, I think that would be a pretty cool opportunity to kind of jump and go over to the client side for.
Yeah, it goes back to having fun with what you're working on. I'm an adult at that time, and so having a few libations was a part of the personal time as well. And so again, you're putting work with something you're doing on the weekends probably anyway, and so it was. Obviously a lot of buzz terms. You talk about lifestyle brands, and every product I worked on at Jim Beam was a lifestyle brand, and so, we did a lot of things on the on-premise where we launched it in restaurants and nightclubs. And it was about really exposing the brand image of that particular product to, young adult drinkers.
Being on the client side, what was the one area that you felt like, okay, this is now, was that where you got your aha moment? At what point were you, or was that later on in your career where you were like, okay, this now, you start off with consumer packaged goods, then you went over to the client side and working on the brands, where you started to see, okay, marketing now is something that I definitely can see long-term being where you wanted to
Yeah,
continue.
I would say that was the start of it, but I would say the real aha moment was actually, 2 jobs later, because I went into the durable goods fitness industry with Life Fitness. But the moment was at Red Bull, and
Okay.
honestly, part of that was because everything that I had learned over the years and everything we did kind of in a traditional manner, or so to speak, at Jim Beam. Red Bull, now it's, of course, it's case studies at Harvard and, Northwestern business schools. But Red Bull broke the mold on how you actually go to market, and how you should market a product. The amount of money you spent on product sampling wasn't a thing back then. And so, giving out a whole 100% can of something that you could actually go purchase in the store or giving away for free was a little bit baffling to the, going into the grocery store and getting one little tiny sample of a cracker. Imagine if Keebler would have given you a whole bag of chips. That's what it was equating to. And so, between supporting action sports and an enormous amount of sampling, and we started collegiate marketing, the traditional advertising, because social media wasn't even in existence then, when I started at Red Bull. So doing the things that we did was not part of what the norm was, and it was fun. I mean, it was, you really had to consciously think, okay, that's not what I did in the traditional manner. This is how we do it here. And so it was, it was really a lot of fun.
So how did that come about? The sampling the entire, basically giving the product away. I mean, how did that come about? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, our strategy was, literally build the belief in the brand one consumer at a time, and truly one consumer at a time. It was never mass sampling, going to, a football game and throwing out as many cans as humanly possible. It was interactions based on a particular category and a strategic category, and really make a consumer connection. Because when I started at Red Bull, nobody knew what energy drinks were really,
yeah.
versus knowing what Red Bull was. I mean, forget the brand for a second. They didn't even know what energy drinks were.
Was that
In
the first energy drink?
No, it wasn't the first. Definitely not in the U.S. And I was in the Midwest, so it literally
Okay.
started in New York and California, and kind of went to the middle. But I was introduced to them actually when I was at a trade show at Jim Beam. That's how I met some of the people at Red Bull. And my first reaction was, what is it, like a Gatorade type product? And it kind of went from there. So, but really, it was so much about consumer education and educating consumers to believe in the functional benefits of what the product had.
And I would think then, with energy drinks and the kind of the marriage between that and action sports, because that was really kind of the beginning of that type of, I guess, really that entire category of
Right.
sports being the action sports versus your traditional.
Correct.
I had to
Correct.
be. I mean, you would think that that had to have played a huge um, part in the overall success of what Red Bull was able to accomplish in their growth.
Yeah, I mean, and no question, because at the time when Red Bull was launched, nobody was really truly supporting the action sports community. The sponsorships that you see now with the athletes, didn't really exist. I mean, that was definitely reserved for the bat and ball sports. So, if Instagram and Facebook and Twitter had been invented then, and action sports would have the followers they had now, that one tweet, that one IG post, can you imagine how viral the brand would have gone instantaneously? And so that's why that connection on a one-to-one basis, and supporting those local as well as national and global action sports athletes was so critical. Because then videos were produced, and photographs were emailed, and then everything started to come on board in the social capacity. But yes, it was absolutely, supporting the community.
It's amazing to think of the growth that they've had in that period of time. What is so from after Red Bull, what was the next kind of step up in your career as far as what was the next role that you took on?
Yeah, then you talk about passion. So I mean, I've been a water skier since I was a little kid, and just through, ironically, doing some nighttime wakeboard events with the folks at Mastercraft Boat Company. Um, I went back into the durable goods category. I owned a Mastercraft boat. Everybody in my family, water skied. So we packed up from Chicago and moved down to Knoxville, Tennessee, which is I kind of like Knoxville is the Detroit of the boating world, if you will, and where Mastercraft is based. And uh, you talk about passion. I always people ask me a lot of times, well, gosh, how'd you go from beverage to boating? And physically, structurally, I didn't know anything about making a boat. But again, Mastercraft is very much a lifestyle product. It's a product that people aspire to get to. It's like if you want a Ferrari someday, that's the kind of thinking that a Mastercraft owner has. Eventually
Okay.
I'll buy that boat. It's a very, it's a higher end, higher net worth consumer that wants to buy that boat. But I kind of liken it is, if you're a golfer and Titleist gives you the opportunity to run marketing, and you're just a passionate golfer, how can you say no? So that's how I ended up at Mastercraft. So.
And at Mastercraft, what was your role there at Mastercraft?
Yeah, I was the VP of marketing. So a little bit of a crossover with Red Bull. I mean, we had an athlete program, so we had professional water skiers and wakeboarders that were representatives of the brand. And then it was about continuing to build brand awareness. And it was very similar to beverage. It was a 3-tiered distribution system. We had boat dealers around the world, so we would actually sell to the boat dealers, and then on an overall brand capacity would continue to leverage the brand. And then there were tertiary entities that we worked with, like, the World Wakeboard Association and the USA Water Ski. And so there's other entities that we'd work with. So not only would we try to help market the sports themselves to get consumers, it's great to sit in the boat, but we always designed the boats from the back, about, flat wakes for skiing, big rampy wakes for wakeboarding. So, I got involved in a lot of engineering and design aspects as well there, but we obviously had a whole execution between events and athletes and brand building. So, anytime you go to a boat show, no different than you go into your Mercedes dealer, you get a beautiful catalog. So there was a lot of time doing photo shoots on water. So I always say that when my Midwest friends were freezing, I was down in the sunny, warm waters of Florida doing photo shoots. So.
Clearly when you know what you want to actually schedule that, you schedule that every year during the winter time so that you're
exactly March was the time frame. Yes.
So for Mastercraft, I assume then you went maybe to another boat company, or did you decide to go make a different change?
Unfortunately, the recession was not very kind to the boating and recreational sport business. I mean, no different than the big 3 car companies. Got injected with stimulus money. Unfortunately, the recreational business didn't. And there was a time where we were very nervous that we were going to go bankrupt in literally about 60 days.
Oh, wow.
It happened fast, just like the stock market. I mean, it happened that quickly. But
so this has been in the 2008, 2009 timeframe?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So quite honestly, I started putting some feelers out there, and that's where I went to. At the time it was Coca-Cola, but it was Glaceau, which had vitamin water and smart water, Powerade, Fuse, and NOS energy drink. So I went back into the beverage industry, and a lot of old Red Bull friends were at Vitamin Water. So it was a little bit of a reunion in some respect.
Gotcha. So then over at that, what did you take on there? What is some of the difference?
Well, that was, it's kind of funny because Jim Beam, is small in comparison to the world of Coca-Cola. So that was really kind of the trigger. You go from, a couple $100 million boat company where it's still very family oriented and passionate, almost like it was a big startup, if anything, but you know, you had a small group of executives. Now you go to the world of Coca-Cola, which is just gigantic. And so that actually taught me a lot of good discipline and process. The distribution system at Coca-Cola is much more complicated than it was at Red Bull.
I bet.
So even though we had this very good nucleus of Glaceau people, now you're in the world of Coca-Cola, where you're part of that team and part of that family. So it really taught me a whole different way of thinking about things, about this, you know, the gigantic red machine, as we used to call it, and they still call it, of getting product out there.
And so you were at Coca-Cola, then from there, maybe back to a boat company?
No, then to go into apparel business, right?
Okay, of course.
Of course. So then I went up to New York, and I worked for New Era Cap, which is,
Oh yeah.
time when I went there, it was the official cap of Major League Baseball and the NFL, and now they have the NBA. They had just signed a licensing agreement with the NFL, so they were ramping up a lot of their teams. So even though we're the official on-field cap of all these sports, the majority of the business was lifestyle driven. So, you know, every, you know, kind of lifestyle kid that, you know, had the same color cap as they had the same color socks as the same color sneakers. And it was all about, you know, it was definitely much of a fashion play as much as it was an athletic on the field play. The company is still growing. They're the largest cap manufacturer in the entire world. And
Wow.
they still continue to innovate with fabrics and styles, and the amount of execution that actually happened, you know, for seasonal styles was incredible. And probably one of the most interesting things is somewhat similar to the beverage industry. You've got your big retailers that sell New Era caps, and then you've got all sorts of just in the city fashion shops that you would never think of, and even big box retailers that you would never think of. And then of course you have your big traditional, you know, sporting type stores.
Yeah.
And then you get into stadiums and every other place that you can buy them. The online business for caps is very large as well.
So I would say that you know, with a company and a brand like New Era, the key for them or their strategy was really going and getting the official designation of these leagues. Would you agree? Was that the biggest part of
Yeah,
their growth?
yeah, of course. Anytime.
Engagement.
So, you know, when I came in, Reebok, you know, prior to me coming in, Reebok had the official on-field gear of the NFL. I mean, literally head to toe.
Okay.
And then when we came in, Nike had everything from, this sounds kind of funny, from the neck down. So jerseys, pants, you know, shoes, and then we had headwear. So yeah, your business can basically erupt immediately with a large licensing agreement. And you know, I wasn't there for the NBA, but the same thing. Adidas was the official cap of the NBA, and then it went to New Era. So all of a sudden, you've got a whole new point of distribution, and your growth goes just, you know, like that.
Yeah, but it's also a lot of dollars that they're having to invest. New Era's having to pay out for those type of
Yeah, and
agreements.
that's business, and you negotiate the contract, and
Yeah,
you know, you sell way more than you actually, you know, pay for the licensing agreement.
you sure hope you do.
Yeah, that's the idea. That's the idea.
That's awesome. So obviously, then collecting that type of experience, what was the next step, or what was the next really big, you know, step within your career within marketing?
Yeah, this was actually really a lot of fun. I actually had a recruiter call me for House of Blues Entertainment in LA.
Oh wow.
And while, you know, with Red Bull or Vitamin Water, I used music as a strategic platform. I never worked in the entertainment industry. I never marketed concerts. And so I literally told the recruiter, I said, "Why are you calling me?" I go, I have zero experience in this business. And I'll link it back to Red Bull. And she said specifically, they said they want to look at some people that worked at Red Bull, because it's about a lifestyle. So it didn't matter if you were promoting, you know, the Nutcracker in one of your clubs and theaters, or death metal groups, or country, or hip hop, or anything else. It's about talking to a, you know, certain type of consumer lifestyle. And you know, there was the House of Blues, of course. But then we had, when I was there, about 45 other clubs and theaters around the country.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say the crossover would be is, I mean, the tactics and the strategy, they're probably looking and say, okay, we're going to deploy the exact same way, regardless of the genre, the audience, the way you go to market will be the same playbook, essentially.
Yeah, it was and it wasn't, because when I went there, we did a pretty large paradigm shift to go after the social and digital space. Now,
Okay.
you can kind of look at that and say, well, of course you did. There's no big epiphany there. However, the data that we were, gleaning over showed an enormous amount of, people grabbing their device and looking at what they're doing on the weekends, and, one click to buy a ticket. And so we did a pretty significant paradigm shift, because when I was there, we did about 9,000 shows a year.
Wow.
So, an enormous amount of tickets that we would sell all the time, and that was just the club and theater division of Live Nation. So that doesn't include concert, big outdoor amphitheaters.
That's a lot of shows per day you're promoting
I
on
had,
average.
yeah, I had an incredible team that worked, directly under my leadership, and then, what would be considered kind of your traditional sales role, so to speak. That whole, group that would, they were called bookers. They would book all the artists. So, it was a well-oiled machine of, bookers getting the acts in the building, and then, working with marketing to sell the tickets. So, there was a good, well-oiled process.
So I guess from there, you, for the most part, then it was on to Clearly Canadian.
Yeah, well, I was been involved in Clearly Canadian. I was part of the original buyout group. So I was involved since 2012, and
Okay.
Helped acquire the brand. So I've been on the board since then. So even though I was at House of Blues, there's like any, I don't want to call ourselves a startup, because the brand actually started a long time ago. It's called a resurgence, if you will, reintroduction. So, when we actually purchased the IP and we're able to bottle again, then you are in startup mode, because here's your first case of product. We haven't sold it to anybody yet, but here's the first case of product. And so, so that was part of the next steps.
Along the way, did you find that there was unique challenges that kind of were similar across each of those as from a marketing standpoint that you faced, or were there things that you're like, wow, this was completely unique over here that we faced, but I haven't really had to deal with that anywhere else? Or were there similarities?
Yeah, now there was a lot of similarities, because you're still talking to a consumer audience that has a purchase choice. They're being bombarded by a lot of companies that were, the sister company, or the side by side competitor of what you have. So you have consumers being bombarded, by other choices. And so, to a consumer, what differentiates you? Are you the leader? Are you the price point, but it tastes the same? Are you actually physically much better? Not knocking on Chevrolet, but there's a big difference between a Chevrolet and a Ferrari. And so,
I would agree.
yeah, so it's just a matter of, communicating, but you're still kind of fighting through that. But, a good comparison at Mastercraft is, listen, there's Ferrari and Lamborghini, or maybe Porsche, Mercedes, BMW. You kind of go in those. And so what makes somebody decide to buy a Porsche versus a Ferrari? And, sometimes it's passion, sometimes it's, just personal preference, or it's performance. But regardless, so you still deal with that competitive set, and being able to, convince that consumer that you want to buy my product versus yours. On the same note, I'm dealing with tens of thousands of thousands of cases of a vitamin water or a Red Bull, and I'm talking about selling 3,500 boats a year. So one sale of $100,000 boat is much different than, a warehouse full of Red Bull. So there's, there's different things. And then you deal with the economic and psychographic things that happen out there. Obviously, ask anybody in the housing industry, you wouldn't, in 2006, you would have never imagined that you couldn't get a housing loan. you'd want to go into banking. You want to be in the mortgage business in 2000.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, so you're dealing with psychographic and economic, things as well. So yeah, there's always those outside challenges that are out of your control, and it's how do you weave and pivot and, keep things moving forward.
As a marketer, is that something that still sits in the back of your mind today of, okay, when, especially being part of the ownership of a consumer brand, clearly Canadian, I mean, that's got to sit in your mind and say, okay, what's going to happen next time the market changes on us?
I don't really think about necessarily the market changes on us. As I go down a water aisle and I see all the competitors and you go meet with, key customers, obviously somebody's got to have some space for you somewhere. And so it's the belief in the proposition we have both in the product, which we have a good product in the bottle, we have a fantastic product in the bottle, and then supporting the retailer as well as the consumer. So to get that pull off the shelf, we've got some new retailers, obviously as we continue to expand our distribution that, we're going to support them. Then we've got some existing retailers that have amazing partnerships with because we're making money and they're making money. And that's what everybody is. That's why you have your retailers, why you have your distributor. And that's why we exist, is so that, everybody's profitable. So then those 2008, 2009 things are kind of, in the back seat. And it's more about the here and now and just continuing to expand distribution.
Gotcha. Okay. So when you look at the differences between when you were selling Red Bull or vitamin water to Clearly Canadian, which is the better product?
Well, they're all so different. They're literally all so different. But what I will say, the products themselves are different. And there's nothing that even in comparison. We're not an energy drink, and we're not a vitamin-based product. But what you can still liken Clearly Canadian to is, while you could say, okay, we're a flavored sparkling, we're also the only clear flavored sparkling out there. So we don't believe we have a true quote unquote direct competitor. So, and here's my correlation. Monster is an absolutely 100% direct competitor of Red Bull. Yeah. Obviously they don't taste the same, but they are an energy drink. That's exactly what they do. We don't have, there are some other sparkling products out there, but the other ones don't have the flavor we have. They're not clear. They're not in glass bottles. So, we take a stance that, we are not in PET for a reason, because, we were trying to keep the environment as clean as humanly possible. And so, we're not in PET for a reason. And there's a lot of sparkling products that are in plastic bottles. So, there's some major differentiation between us and what, a retailer would put us in this sparkling water category.
So from a marketing perspective, you brought up something very interesting that I didn't really ever consider was, the glass bottle versus PET, and the fact that the glass is being more environmentally friendly. It's got to be also more costly for the product. How does that, as a marketer, how do you position that as a value to the consumers?
Well, I think, we definitely don't forget where the product came from, and the fact that, you even remember the product, and, it came back from the late 80s, early 90s. And so when we literally came out of the gate, we wanted to go back to the original teardrop shaped bottle. You can Google it and you can see all the iterations over the years of Clearly Canadian. It took a lot of different package designs, and so we just thought, in a strategic perspective, it was really important to come back out with what how the product was originally manufactured. So, does that mean we won't ever consider other packaging alternatives in the future? That's kind of TBD. Right now, we want to continue expansion with what we have. And, we're obviously very happy with the current results.
What would you say, again, going back from a perspective with marketing is, how have you identified where your target market is for like a Clearly Canadian, or have you already established that?
Well, we absolutely have, because, you went through my career, so you can understand that I'm, no longer 29 years old.
No.
So the fact that I was kind of, raised on it, we absolutely go after, a boomer and an older Gen Xer that remembers the product. The fun part about it is, if you are somebody that's my age, you're introducing it to your kids that have never heard of it. And so it's that initial reaction for that young adult opening up and go, wow, this really tastes good.
Yeah.
And so, again, there's so many products out there that you crack open the bottle and it just tastes bad, or it just tastes okay. And so, it doesn't really matter what you're called. If you don't taste good, it's really hard to, sell another bottle of that product. So, we've got the adults introducing it to their kids, and they're just all on board with it. I mean, even if you look at our social posts, there's people that go, "What is it? I've never heard of it," and said, "Oh, you've got to try it." So we've got our own communities rallying around friends saying, "Oh, you've got to go pick this up. You've got to try it. It's, from my childhood." And so there's this very organic buzz going on. "Oh, thank you so much for bringing it back." And it's just incredible communication. That's not from us. That's from people, online, just excited that it's back.
The fanatics out there.
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, exactly. We've got some incredible video. The best video I saw that a husband posted when we did our online campaign, and it was delivered to her house, and he just left it in the corrugated box that was packed, and literally had her coming through the door, and she was like, "Oh my God, is that it? Is that it?" And she started dancing and singing, and then they opened it up. So it was, that makes you proud. It makes you smile that you've done the right thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So between 2012, when y'all brought it back, how long was it off the shelves?
Well, I think that's probably a little gray, because technically the company never went bankrupt.
Okay.
So it was still being sold at a very small amount up until, I think it was 2009. So you could still find it, but very rare. It was still around. So, and then let's call it just kind of went silent for a while until we had the opportunity to buy it.
Yeah, well, it's definitely one I remember. I still remember the geese. For whatever reason, I remember the geese flying. I think maybe the fruits that go into the bottle, but
Yep.
It's, I guess, part of the '80s experience.
But there's some relevance there, because we are bottled at source with Canadian water, and so the water that we get is very good and very pure. So there's still a lot of brand equity that was based in those old commercials.
Yeah, well, I think it's, you look at that water category, and I don't know if that's what's considered as a water category, or if it's how that is defined, but there are so many different competitors or entries into that space now. I mean, it seems like it's perfect timing for you guys to really.
Yeah, it's still there's about 3 different categories that are growing, and the sparkling water category is continuing to grow, and is actually passing CSDs. So we know we're in a space that is strong and climbing, and the retailers that we are talking to know the brand. It is actually kind of fun a lot of times, because I had one meeting where an analyst was, we joked about it because he didn't know about the product. And they said, "Listen, I'm not going to ask your age, but I think he told me when he graduated college." And I said, "Okay." This is when I felt out. I said, "Okay, you're my daughter's age."
Yeah.
But he had never heard of it. Whereas our buyer absolutely knew the product. So yeah, you run into that in a business capacity where you're talking with a buyer and they just don't know it, because they weren't born yet.
So it's almost like introducing a new product and at the same time an old product.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
exactly.
playing two different sides. Well, that's interesting. Well, the journey's been amazing. It's I appreciate you sharing with us the different steps that you've taken along the way, and it's kind of gotten to where you are today. Uh, so clearly, you love marketing.
Yeah.
You're very good at it. What is it though? If you had to identify one single thing about marketing that is like that, this is why I'm a marketer.
I actually kind of think it probably goes more back to the brands that I've worked on. So
Okay.
you can say marketer, but I prefer to say, lifestyle brand guy, if you will,
Yeah.
because I've been very fortunate and blessed to have opportunities to go work at companies and brands that fit me and my personality and my lifestyle. So, I can't think of, I look around your office there and, if I tilt the camera, my man cave looks very similar, with signed, sports memorabilia.
Yeah.
That's, I didn't know anything about the apparel industry. That's why I went to New Era. You're dealing with Major League Baseball and the NFL and all sorts of sporting teams. I love sports, and that's why I got into it. I loved water skiing, and that's how I got into it. I learned how to love the beverage industry, but the lifestyle that most of my consumers are in the beverage industry was really what I was all about. And so it's just one of these things where I truly loved what I did.
Yeah.
So and do. So
That kind of leads us to this next question. If you could go back now
mhm.
to your younger self and leave yourself just a single piece of advice, what would it be?
Wow. The single piece of advice would be, knowing what I know now, would be follow your passion, follow your heart.
Yeah.
It's really, what you want to do. And I know the first trip up is, man, I just got to get a job out of college. Just got to get my first paycheck. Whether mom and dad paid for college or you've got student loans, stacked high, you just got to get that job. But I can't think of anything more miserable as going to a job that you don't like. And if you wake up in the morning and you go, wow, what I got to do today? Here's my checklist, but you're excited about it, not anxious about it. Love what you work on. Love what you
Yeah.
do.
Well, it's clearly you've done that and you followed your passion because from the water skiing to the action life sports, it's, uh, it shows through all the different steps you've taken throughout your career. I guess really the last thing I want to ask is, what is the future of marketing in your mind? As far as, you've obviously got with Clearly Canadian, you've got your model that you're working on there, but as far as, all the different new technologies, platforms for that marketers and CMOs can utilize to help, drive and manage their business. It's speeding up. It's getting faster and faster and faster with all these new solutions, platforms, tactics, social. How do you manage it, and what do you think the future holds for marketers
Yeah.
and CMOs?
I would say the biggest thing is it's continued education. It's not like the practical education, like going into a classroom.
Yeah.
And of course, information is much more readily available online than it was before. But if I think about when my early career is, you kind of had a handful of strategies and tactics that you would execute, and they're traditional platforms. And, that's why things like radio and out-of-home and print have had to advance electronically and kind of change their model. My point to all this is I think I spend as much time, at least after hours, just reading and trying to learn about what the next best thing is on the way to talk to consumers. Because, you go all the way back to the days where I was in the agency, and, I'm going to say a term that's almost antiquated. And so probably some of your listeners are going to not even know what the acronym is for, but I used to produce an enormous amount of FSIs that would drop in your Sunday newspaper. And those are all the coupons that would fall out.
Yeah.
And, now you come home and you get your mail, and your local grocery store has targeted you, and everything you just purchased last week, you now just received a coupon for.
Yeah.
So, even the way we do simple promotions is so electronically driven and Uber targeted to that consumer. It's just a matter of continuing to educate yourself. And whereas I was probably annoyed way back then when I would be cold called about a new technology that somebody's calling me about, now I listen to them just to see if it's interesting to maybe we should do business together.
Yeah.
You
But
know,
when you, after they call you and you listen to them and you politely say thank you,
yeah.
do you then go check out their information? Obviously, you know, to see, okay, are they actually doing what they
Yeah.
preach?
Yeah. Well, the beauty of it is usually it's a phone call and you're, typing in your computer at the same time, looking at their website and then asking them to send a proposal and going through it. But yeah, uh, I mean, of course, I also kind of go back and think of, okay, next week I've got a meeting with retailer XYZ. And so now you've got somebody calling on me doing the same thing that I'm going to be doing next week.
Exactly.
So, you know what? I'm going to give this person 10, 15 minutes, send me a proposal, but there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
So they're hustling just as much as we are.
With all the different tactics and plans, strategies, and ways and channels in which advertisers and marketers can utilize, it just seems like it's just got to be very difficult to get your arms around that and to keep your arms around it.
Yeah, I would say, and gosh, this is maybe a horrible comparison, but when you talk about somebody that is a surgeon, they are constantly keeping up on what is new and is different. I had a blown ACL years and years ago, so I've got a pretty scarred.
Water skiing?
No, football, but anyway. But the scar that I have down the middle of my kneecap, they don't even do anymore. Yeah. So my point is those doctors continue to educate, and I'm fairly certain the guy that did my knee is still in business, and he doesn't do this procedure anymore. So he's taking new tactics or new strategies to help people, and marketers need to do the same thing, or frankly, then at the end of the day, you're not really relevant in the world of marketing if you don't adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a great analogy and great comparison. So, well, I really appreciate the time, John. This has been incredibly enlightening. It's a great story. I think your experience, what you're doing now with, and how you got to where you are today, especially with that Clearly Canadian. I wish you nothing but the best for that product, that brand, and thank you for being on the show.
Well, I appreciate it, Rusty. ClearlyCanadian.com. You can go find it and find a store near you.
Well, thank you everyone for joining today's podcast. Please make sure to follow, subscribe, and share this with other marketers and CMOs in your organization and your different groups. You'll have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks.